them all together now, working for each other on certain issues. Then we can have them if there are certain things that affect us also. So I'm trying to start that give and take process already to include everyone, to understand this is all our home. Whether we speak a different language, have a different faith, we still have families. We've chosen this as our home. We have to do this together. And that's been something my father taught me in my faith school. Thank you for having us. Oh, you get first and last question. That's good. It's always good to be present.
Quickly. I don't want to tax anybody or anybody else. I don't mean that kind of tax. What is your position on fracking in upstate New York?
Fracking in upstate New York.
In the watershed, in New York City's watershed.
Well, that's the key, right? Nobody wants to see any of our watersheds impacted at all for the profit of something. I don't see how anyone could want that. There should be a buffer. And I'm not an expert to tell you where there are safe places to frack. I just believe fracking in general has any impact on our environment, especially in our watershed community. I will be opposed to it. They can find a place to me that has no impact at all. I guess it's something to listen about. But for me right now, anything in the watershed is welcome.
Obviously, I'm talking about Flushing Meadows and the soccer stadium. That's the motivation for the question.
Sure.
But generally speaking, do you feel that public green space should be used for private development?
No. I think we don't have a lot left. You know, how much green space do we have left at this point that we can say, take an unfortunate side is that the city wants to bully up on anyone, like what they tore down at Lord's Point and do some type of eminent domain. You're going to lose. But we need to stand up and say, no, don't do this. When it came before Community Board 7, we voted against it, especially that whole mall expansion down at City Field, soccer stadium. You just can't. The tennis stadium was a little different. They were talking about a road next door. And you got to remember, that's the #1 economic generator in the entire city of New York. That's 2 weeks. So when you balance all the things you want to do in the city and how you're going to pay for it, that was one of the ones that you had to balance everything. And it all came together at the same time. You know, soccer stadium came, mall came, tennis stadium came, and it just freaked everyone out, and rightfully so. When you keep taking our parks, keep taking our parks. So, no, there's no room for taking of our parks. There is a nice little law that says if you give back park space for the park space you take, the city will go with it. Well, where's that park space that you're going to give back? It's going to be in the Adirondacks? Yes, and that's the problem. I mean, sure, I'll take your Flushing Meadow and I'll give you 2 acres up in Syracuse. No, that doesn't help us at all. But that's in there. Guess who put that in there? Albany. Remember, that brings another dichotomy. I'll mention it quickly. City Hall has to go many times up to Albany to ask for things. What do they call it? Home rule. How horrible is that? We're the city that generates the entire state's economic generating engine, and yet we have to go to Albany, and they love it. They said, "Actually, you're not going to get that." For example, if I wanted to draft a crime more than a misdemeanor, can't do it. Can't do a felony misdemeanor. Only do misdemeanor. If I wanted to do anything that impacted, remember they took away when out-of-staters came into New York the tax that they paid, our commuter tax. They didn't even pay attention. The commuter tax was taken away from us during a battle with two upstate New York, two people never heard of before. Some of us got taken away. We lose billions of dollars for that. And that made perfect sense, and the state was okay with it. You will never get that back. And when the state says, yeah, tax us again. It's home rule. So you lose the funding, how do we pay for these things every year? It gets harder and harder.
Right. Any questions here?
Thank you very much.
Paul's opponent is Dennis Stafford, who will be talking to the Republican candidate for City Council District.
Thanks. Republican and Reform Party and Conservative. I have 3 different lines on the ballot. So you can vote for that, any one of the 3. I'm not going to go into a long spiel about my background because I know many of you in this room, but for those of you who don't know me, I'm one of the vice presidents of the Civic Association. I had the privilege of cooking with Elliot and coming to the meetings when he called them. And I think I've been vice president for 5 or 6 years, on the board for a few years before that. My wife Jane, who's here with me, we've lived here in Douglaston for 15 years, raised our 2 kids here, including our son Nick, who's a sophomore at the University of Chicago, taking a quarter off to work on my campaign as one of my key aides. Jane has also been very active in the Little Neck Douglaston Historical Society. She's on the board there, as well as the Local Development Corporation that's trying to revitalize our little village downtown here. So, we're very used to being at these meetings and working with all of you. For those who don't know me, I've worked nationally as well as locally. I used to run a national anti-crime and quality of life group, the Center for Community Interest, that worked for a lot of what Rudy Giuliani and similar reform-minded mayors did to bring down the violent crime rates, like what Bloomberg did to continue that and to improve neighborhood quality of life. We were the people who helped to draft and defend the law that was squeegee men, so they're the aggressive panhandlers, so they don't come up to your cars anymore and try to, clean your windshield with dirty water, and they don't follow you into ATM machines. At the state level, we helped to draft and then defend in court Megan's law about notifying you if there are released sex offenders living down the block, living near schools. Kendra's law to require the potentially violently, mentally ill to take their medication so that we can get them off the sidewalks where they're a threat to themselves and others and into the treatment they desperately need. So that's what I've been doing locally and nationally for the last really 20 years of my life. I've worked in Nassau County, 10 minutes away since losing a very close election 12 years ago. Just recently I won a big victory there on behalf of communities around the state that upholds local sex offender residency restrictions that over 100, 150 communities have that say if you're a released sex offender, it's not enough that we just tell the world, tell you that there's a released sex offender down the block or across from PS 209 and in Whitestone, like we found one living here in the district, but we're going to restrict where they can live. And I've proposed such legislation in the city. So both in my personal life, my after-hours life as a community activist, and in what I've dedicated my professional life to, I've been working for both Douglaston and Northeast Queens and communities around the country. On some issues, stop and frisk, I am strongly for it. And don't get me wrong, these stops have got to be as respectful, as civil, as courteous as possible. But the bottom line is they get guns off the streets and save lives, and typically it's the lives of poor and minority children. If there's one statistic that sums up stop and frisk, it's that the teen homicide rate in Chicago is 4 times as high as what it is in New York. I don't want us to become Chicago, and I don't want us to go back to what we were under David Dinkins. My opponent, Paul, mentioned the non-citizen voting bill. Incredibly, 34 members of this city council have proposed this bizarre law where non-citizens could come and vote when they've been here just 6 months. Now, I heard my opponent say, okay, 6 months is, that's too little. Almost everyone agrees on that. You can be here longer than that on a student visa, but what is it, 7 months, 12 months? I've been astounded to hear my opponent say that he would support this concept of non-citizens voting. And don't get me wrong on this, I'm as pro-immigrant as you can get. We're all immigrants or children or grandchildren of immigrants, but one of the things that offends me so much about this proposal is that I think it's an attack on immigrant groups. I think it's an attack on those immigrants who work towards citizenship, like so many of our Chinese and Korean and Italian neighbors are doing now throughout Northeast Queens, like our parents or grandparents did. It's a back of the hand slap at them and all their hard work to come here to be American citizens. And by attacking the very concept, the very idea of citizenship, it really attacks what binds us together as a nation of immigrants. So, as someone who is pro-immigrant, pro-immigration, a proud grandchild of immigrants, I am going to fight any such bill at City Hall. And sometimes you just have to stand up and do that. It's interesting that, you know, my opponent seems to be running as the insider candidate at a time when there is very justifiable cynicism and outrage at politicians. When we've had, for heaven's sake, Stan Halloran from my own party, along with Malcolm Smith from Paul's party, get an early morning visit from the FBI and be let off in handcuffs. This is outrageous, and I propose that Dan Halloran should not be collecting a public paycheck. Alan Hevesy should not have a public pension. No pensions for convicted public officials, and suspension without pay for indicted public officials. So I understand that real outrage. I understand the people who come up to you at 6 in the morning and say, "I hate all of you politicians." And you know, it gets you angry when you're doing this. And I yell back at them. I never yell back at the ones who say, "I hate all you Republicans." That's legitimate to me. I do get angry at 6 in the morning when I've gotten up there, and I know Democrats get up there. I do get angry at those who don't say, "I hate all you Republicans," but say, "I hate all you politicians. You're all the same." Yeah, Ted Cruz and Nancy Pelosi, they're all the same. But it is incredible to go to the extreme of running as the insiders candidate. Sometimes you've just got to stand up. And that ties to the fact that I'm very proud here, and in particular, for those of you who don't know, I've gotten the support of one of the losing candidates in the Democratic primary, Paul Graziano, who I know many of you here supported, many civic associations supported. He ran a strong third in the primary. He has crossed party lines to endorse me. And in fact, 3 of the 4 Democratic candidates have refused to endorse the winner of the primary. And Senator Tony Avella, a Democrat who I fought a very hard battle against, lost by 1% of the vote 12 years ago, has also said he has stayed and he will stay neutral. He will not support the candidate of his own party. That says something. And what that's largely about is the issue of overdevelopment, which is also part of our quality of life here, and something we've really got to fight against. Now, anyone can come up to you, anyone will say, "I'm against overdevelopment." Yeah, we're all against overdevelopment, we're all against pollution, we're all for motherhood and apple pie, and we're all against war and for peace. So the proof is in the pudding, though. The big reason why 3 Democrats who ran for this seat are refusing to support the winner. One has actually endorsed me. Another, Chrissy Voskerichian, has said that I can tell people that she's being very supportive of me and put up a lawn sign for me, is because my opponent is the candidate of the Real Estate Board of New York and their so-called Jobs for New York PAC that poured $360,000 in so-called independent expenditures into supporting his campaign in the primary, which means he effectively spent 3 times as much as any of his opponents. They had a limit, we all have a limit of $170,000 in the primary, $170,000 in the general election. But through a loophole, the Paul Balone campaign had $530,000 spent on its behalf, $170,000 that they spent and $360,000 that Jobs for New York spent. That's a big, and they put out some really malicious mailings, not just malicious negative stuff, but a piece which we have here, some of you received it in the mail, exploiting a memorial to dead children, to murdered school children in Newtown, Connecticut, a picture of an actual memorial, a beautiful white picket fence there with the first names of every one of those 20 murdered children painted onto the fence, and then townspeople bought the brush flowers, set up a little shrine. And somehow on the back of this was an attempt, a sick attempt to link this tragedy, this murder, to why you should vote for Paul Balone for a city council slot in another jurisdiction 100 miles away. It really is. Now, I'm not just saying this because I'm running in this race. I've been in politics a long time. I'm older than I used to be older than I look. My son will tell you I've caught up to my age. I've done this game on and off for 40 years, and I'm mostly on the Democratic side of the aisle. I switched on like a Rudy Giuliani, Pete King Democrat. That's really what I am, and I switched parties about 15 years ago, really on law and order issues. I'm totally against Ted Cruz and his government shutdown. But this is the worst thing I've seen from either a Democrat or a Republican in all the time I've been in politics. It's just breathtaking. You don't use the murder of little school children. Also, what was put out by another independent PAC. So, by the way, I understated when I said 530,000. There were some other so-called independent groups as well. One group sent out a piece that says it's a beaming Christian cross, as we sometimes see in artwork. It says, "Vote your fate. Vote for Paul Vallone." Now, I don't know how someone who just had a piece sent, and needless to say, it wasn't sent to Bay Terrace. It wasn't sent to people with names like mine. My father was Jewish. That's half of my heritage. It went to many of my Catholic friends. It went to church-going Catholics. It totally offended many of them as well it should. Vote your faith. I don't know how someone who has this sent out on the African can stand here and say, I'm the candidate of unity. And I think that's why so many Democrats have either crossed party lines, or a former Democrat like me, or are actually staying neutral in this race. I certainly hope that all of you who are Republican or conservative or independent, and all of you who are Douglaston residents are going to be with me. But I hope that those of you who are Democrats are also going to take a look at what the other Democrats, including leaders like Senator Avella, who had been a foe of, we fought against each other, but what they're saying in this race. And I hope to have your support on either the Republican, the Conservative, or the Reform Party line when we go into that booth in just 2 months. 2 weeks. And my wife also has it marked. That's one thing we've got in common. Both our wives have it marked on their on the calendars. It's now I guess 13 days, 23 hours, and 45 minutes until the polls close, and we both get to take our wives out for a well-earned dinner. Not that night, though. So I would be happy to have any questions. I guess Elliot goes first, but Marie has it.
No.
She's only a vice president, too.
This is a real quick question. I answered this before, but everyone should hear it. In spite of the possible time problem in January, whoever gets sworn in, will you opt for participatory election?
Yes. Absolutely. I've said this at quite a number of forums now, and to quite a number of questioners. It's one of the few good things Dan Halloran did, joining with, I think, only 10 or 15 other councilmen. I think it's a great idea. It gets the community involved, and I strongly support it, and I will work on it from the day I'm elected.
I just wanted to follow up because we asked the same question before, and I thought it was fair just to ask you guys. What is your position on fracking in New York State, and what is your position on women's right to choose? My position on fracking is, I think Governor Cuomo has gotten it right by saying, let's study this. I know you and I have talked about this before, debated this before, but it was really just about my wanting to make sure that we do debate the issues, like Governor Cuomo is having the experts do, and at a civic like this, we could hear from both sides. I tend to be, we all have our instincts on this, and those of us who are not environmental scientists can only go by our instincts and what scientific background we have, what we remember from high school, whatever courses we took in college. I know that we desperately need energy independence in this country. I also know that those areas in upstate New York have been in a horrible economic slump, and right over the border in Pennsylvania, there's something of an economic boom. So my instinct is to be for it, because I also, from what I've read, and again, I'm not a scientist, what I've seen is it's safe.
And I know that on the anti-side, there's been a fair amount of fear-mongering, like that famous film about the water catches on fire in Pennsylvania, except that's been happening for 100 years, long before fracking, because of something that's beyond my ability, from what I remember from high school chemistry, to understand. But there are gases, natural gases, that are in solution. So everyone there has a little collar trick that they light a match and catch their water on fire. Having said that, though, just because people like Michael Moore and Yono Oko, still a long day. Yoko Ono may not be the best people to present this, and just because they put out fear-mongering doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong. So I have an open mind on this. I want to hear both sides. I think Cuomo got it just right. He had the instinct that I did to be for it because of the tremendous economic and national security and environmental need for safe energy. But he said, let's stop and study it.
And what about the women's rights too?
One thing I'll tell you is you'll hear the same answer from me that people in the parishes will hear, and the people in Bay Terrace will hear. I'm not someone who goes to the Conservative Party and says I'm pro-life when I'm seeking their endorsement, like my opponent was supposed to have done 4 years ago, and then sends out a flyer to women in Bay Terrace that says I am strongly in support of a woman's right to choose. I say the same thing to my friend Florence Maloney, who heads the Joint Parish Right to Life Committee, and my friend Tom Long at the Conservative Party, that I say to the many women who are friends of mine who are pro-choice, which is I'm certainly pro-choice if you have to divide it that way, pro-life, pro-choice. I don't like using those terms. I don't think this is about chocolate or vanilla, though. That's a choice. I think this is a struggle, a clash between life interests. I really am in. You probably heard that Norma McCalvey, later said she got a lot of flurry of publicity when it was reported that she'd become a Right to Life activist, but she actually explained that she really hadn't become Right to Life. She had a great phrase. She said, I'm really in the muddled middle, where the polls tell you that 60% of the people are. And when you look at that, and even it shows the great majority in New York are there, people strongly support, as they should, the right to abortion in the first trimester, and then in certain circumstances, such as life or health, in the second trimester. Where exactly you draw that? Well, somebody who's beyond my pay grade once said it was beyond his pay grade. I can't tell you exactly where I draw the line, but I think I am with the majority of the people who support the right to choose an abortion, certainly throughout the first trimester, and with limits in certain circumstances in the second trimester. But one thing I'll assure you, you'll hear the same thing from me that Tom Long of the Conservative Party will hear, that the most liberal person in Bay Terrace will hear. You won't have to worry that you're getting two different stories out of two sides of one mouth.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bill.
I asked this question before. The legalization of marijuana has come up again. It comes up every 10 or 20 years. What is your position on the legalization of marijuana?
I'm strongly against it. I'm father of two teenage children. I'm even very dubious of the medical marijuana thing. I actually think, and all of us want, obviously we want relief for cancer patients, but I also know, because I have, just like I'm tracking some memory of my high school science classes and my college science classes, we deliver drugs. I don't quite understand why you can't take the active ingredient, THC, and if it really does ease pain, ease nausea, have it prescribed by a doctor. And I'll tell you, I'll still keep an open mind, but my open mind was pretty much settled when I saw the reaction to the first medical marijuana bill that was passed in California. And then you saw these so-called, what are they called, dispensaries, and you saw all these potheads gloating. They literally, one of them looked into the camera and said, "I have cancer, man." You know, this was